Hello, my name is Osha. I like to talk about American history. I'm continuing with my analysis of President Trump's April the 1st, 2026 speech. This was just yesterday. I titled this The Sweet Sorrow of President Trump's Oxymoronic Speech. Of course, an oxymoron. Sweet sorrow is an example of an oxymoron, right? Uh, what is sweet cannot be sorrowful. What is sorrowful is not sweet. And so you put it together, sweet sorrow, right? Just like saying deafening silence, right? Deafening silence. So you get the picture. That's what an oxymoron is. So now, yesterday, President Trump declared, sort of was declaring victory, talking about how great the war has gone, how we've had such great military successes, degrading or obliterating Iran's military infrastructure, decapitated its leadership. Basically, the same thing that we've heard for the past month, right? He's been saying the same thing for the past month. So if you're looking for uh, anything new, no substance in the words, it's in the words, spoken. I mean, nothing new, right? But significantly, what is sweet is that there were no indications that President Trump was going to um, be landing boots on the ground. There will be no large scale invasion of Iran. He clearly indicated America was not going to take Kharg Island. He talked about that he was not going to destroy Kharg. He was not going to destroy their oil depots, their oil infrastructure. 90% of Iran's oil passes through Kharg Island, right? Their exports, and so President Trump, who had initially threatened doing something about that, that was an indication he was not going to go do anything of the sort. And of course, he indicated he was not going to take the Strait of Hormuz. He left it for the allies to do something about it. It is oxymoronic, right? That well, if he's already destroyed Iran's ability to fight, their capabilities, their military infrastructure, then America should be able to just easily walk through, right? Just walk in and seize Kharg Island, secure the Strait of Hormuz. But he's doing neither, right? So that's an oxymoron. You can see the paradox. So he's achieved no. Uh, I mean, if the the ability of Iran's to fire missiles, of course, there's been substantial destruction of many of its missile launchers, but Iran continues to fire missiles at Israel, and of course, different targets in the GCC nations, right? Even going as far as firing a missile, a long range missile towards Diego Garcia, which is a joint military base operated by the UK and the United States, right? So you can see if Iran's military infrastructure has been decimated, then but somehow it is able to conjure up new missiles to fire at Israeli at Israel and the GCC states and U.S. military bases, then such a foe is very fearful indeed, right? If they through magic or some means they can just conjure up a missile. So, but nothing of the sort is happening. Iran, Iranians, yeah, they're many things, but they're not magicians, right? So yeah, so they still have their military infrastructure. They still have sufficient power, military power, dug up, hidden in the mountains where America has not been able to reach. Um, in the meantime, there are indications that at best America is going to uh, uh, confine its military activities, right? Its military operations to airstrikes, right? Bombing, which it has been doing all the while, right? For the next 2 to 3 weeks, and it's not likely to secure anything um, more substantial, right? It's just going to keep doing the same thing that it's been doing for the past month, right? With the bombs. Meanwhile, Iran has its its military arsenal dug up somewhere, protected. Um, at the same time, when one considers that if he's saying that the Strait of Hormuz is going to just open up, naturally, over time, he's admitting to the control of to Iran maintaining control of the Strait of Hormuz, right? He's not going to do anything about it. So then this was one of the threats, one of the threats that Iran was going to use, right, in their asymmetric warfare to control the Strait of Hormuz. And so, well, they say, or I say, I haven't seen it particularly anywhere, but I'd say the battle you do not lose is the one you do not fight, and the war you do not lose. Is the one you are able to walk away from. You can't win it. A gambling man thinks they will take the risk and go forward. I'm glad that President Trump is not risking America's destruction and further American lives by taking that gamble. And yes, a lot of what the president was saying was just bluff, right? Over the past 1 week, past 2 weeks, we see he's bluffed with threatening to destroy Iran's energy plants. It didn't. It postponed it by 5 days, postponed again by 10 days. And it hasn't done that because Iran has threatened that, okay, well, they'll retaliate. And Iran, he's aware that Iran has the ability to destroy the energy infrastructure in the GCC nations as well. And you see Iran's access to its proxies, right? The Houthis in Yemen, the others, Hezbollah, and then in Iraq, those that are supporting it, right? Um, and there are other means, right? So recently, there was a news of a journalist who unfortunately was kidnapped in the Middle East, right? These are, you know, President Trump did mention that Iran is a state sponsor of terrorism, right? So if one of the tools it has in its arsenal is to do these kidnappings of innocent civilians, and the extended war, the United States engaging in this extended war continues to put the United States at risk. Iran probably wouldn't engage in these acts of terrorism against American civilians if it were not a war. The thing is, that's what happens in a war. America is clearly the superior military force, but Iran, in defending itself, right, is not under any obligation to engage America in a conventional warfare, right? It has its own objectives as well, and it's going to use that's what's called asymmetric warfare, and includes guerrilla warfare. Now, several guerrilla warfare, it's asymmetric warfare, unconventional warfare. That's the method, right? That a power that's not as strong as the bigger, larger, more resourceful uh, force, that's the sort of warfare they engage in, right? And this has been successful in history. Like, uh, considering we're even talking about Iran, Persia, right? Iran was once the site of the largest empire in the world under the Achaemenids, right? The Achaemenid empire under Cyrus the Great, right? They controlled half the world's population. They ruled over almost half of the world's population, 49 percent, right? With all their might and power, they were defeated. They got their butts, whipped by the Greeks, Alexander the Great. So anything can happen, right? So they must have used some kind of method or whatever, but they defeated the strongest power in the world, the Achaemenid Empire. That's of the Persians, right? They were the strongest in the world. You can watch that movie 300. It's about that fight. The Achaemenids, they won that battle against the Spartans, but the bravery of the Spartans, those 300 soldiers, the fact that they refused to surrender, it inspired the rest of the Greeks, and then they went on to continue to fight, and they defeated the Achaemenids over time. They defeated them, and we know Alexander the Great. He defeated them between 330 334 and 330 BC. He defeated them. Now, later on, and that's the thing about the Iranians, the Persians, they will always fight you back. So they eventually defeated the Seleucids. So the Seleucids, that's one of the generals of one of the generals of Alexander the Great would establish a Seleucid empire. That's a Greek empire in within Iran, Persia. But they were eventually defeated by the Parthians, right? The Parthians, that's another, they mixed with the Persians. They were an Iranian group from the Parni in northeast Iran, and they came and they defeated and kicked out the Seleucids. That's a Greek empire that of Alexander, that one of Alexander the Great's generals had created when they defeated the Achaemenids. So the thing about war is history shows us that, look, sometimes the smaller force, their defeat, if they're just, they have the resolve, they can defeat that bigger power. Our history should be able to teach us. That's what happened in Vietnam, right? Vietnam, we it was our unwinnable war, right? We have that lesson from Vietnam. The same thing uh, when we consider our main rival in the world today, China, right? Modern China was created by Mao Zedong. They call him Chairman Mao, right? Mao Zedong. Mao Zedong waged a guerrilla warfare against for 9 years. It was a very long war. I read his biography against Chiang Kai-shek. Chiang Kai-shek he controlled the national government. Chiang Kai-shek was supported by America, the West. But Mao Zedong, using guerrilla warfare, they were a smaller force, were not well resourced. Uh, Mao Zedong was not even a trained military man. He was not an actual military person. But of course, he was a communist. They were trying to, they were rebels. They were trying to do a communist revolution, and they were supported by the USSR, by the way. But uh, the guerrillas of Mao Zedong, they succeeded. They defeated the strong national government and military power might supported by the West of Chiang Kai-shek, and they were driven into Taiwan, the small Taiwanese government that you know today. And you see the formerly small nation, small force of Mao Zedong has become the mighty, the big China today, dictating to Taiwan, right? So things can turn around. You have to also remember even our history, right? We were the underdog, and I'm very glad. President Trump did a good thing yesterday, right? He did a good thing. I'll get to why I'm saying he did a good thing, but I'm gonna just quickly finish this thought. We were once an underdog, right? In 1776, we were an underdog, and we defeated the greatest naval power, right? You can't underestimate the resolve of a people. We defeated the greatest naval power. They had more sophisticated arms than we did. They had a stronger navy, but we defeated them, right? And so we should remember from our history, the history of the world, that it happens, right? It happens. Iran uh, won this war, right? They've just won this battle. Uh, Yesterday's speech, the April 1st, 2026 speech by President Donald Trump, that's as close to a concession speech you'll ever get from President Donald Trump. And that's why I'm saying he did a good thing. At least he's not suicidal, and he's not going to send Americans on a suicidal mission. He's not going to send American troops on a suicidal mission. He's not going to destroy the U.S. economy. That's not his objective, right? And somehow, whoever, I don't know what cause, who he listened to, but um, cooler heads did prevail somehow. I noticed, what's his name? Is it Joe Kent, who was the director of the National Counterterrorism Center, who recently resigned in March, protesting the war. He had been advocating, he dropped in my feed, he'd been advocating for Americans to write to the White House that no boots on ground, that America needs to get out of this war immediately. And yeah, so that was and this person by the way, he's done 11 tours, right? He did 11 tours in Iraq. He did he's a former Green Berets, former Special Forces. His wife was killed in Syria by a suicide bomber, right? So he's somebody who's bled for, he's served, in the military. It's not like a lot of people who haven't, but he's a former, he was in the CIA, but so he's somebody, but he's saying, hey, no war, that don't go to war with Iran. And, there's wisdom in that restraint. Sometimes, one has to know when not to go to battle, when not to go to war, when it can cost you. It could cost you more. It can cost you everything. It could. What is it that we're willing to give up? So there's some. You might be the strongest power in the world, but it's not every battle you're going to win, right? It's not every a war you're going to, or you should know those battles, those wars. You should not engage in, right? You should have the wisdom, the ability, the sagacity to know which battles, sagacity to know which battles not to engage in. Otherwise, you'll be spent as a force, you'll be destroyed, right? And, the history is replete with many great powers, the strongest powers who were spent before their times, who were destroyed before their times because they didn't know what battles not to engage in. And so, fortunately, President Trump knew, he understands to withdraw from this one. As the challenge is restraining Israel, right? Because America withdraws, but Israel's still there. Israel is still there fighting the wars. But as Prime Minister of Britain said, that his concern is about Britain's national interest, right? And President Trump, our president, should be concerned about America's national interest. President Trump said rightly, he said it that, look, we have nothing, we don't need anything in the Middle East, right? Our oil doesn't come from the Middle East. Less than 5% of our oil comes from the Middle East. We don't need anything in the Middle East, right? We have oil, Western Hemisphere, and America is extremely resourceful, right? 97% of America's lands are still are rural, right? 97%. We've got all these resources, diversity of resources that we still haven't fully explored, right? And we should go back to what we were known for, right? We had a great reputation in the world. Our businessmen, we had good faith. All of that has been destroyed, or seriously damaged because of this war, right? Because we broke international law in engaging in this war in the first place, right? And the feints, used by President Trump, they were discussing having a negotiation, and then he decapitated their leadership during the negotiations. When are people going to trust Americans again? And this is something that people did in the past. People trusted Americans as business people, right, as a nation, and this is part of what makes our business people successful globally, right? So if we can't, because good people who demonstrate good faith, they're the ones who can honor contracts, right? They can honor contracts. You can enter into a deal with them, and they can be expected to keep their promise, the end of the deal. So those are the things that America needs to focus on, and America needs to go and focus on repairing its damaged reputation, and then fully exploiting its resources within its own uh, boundaries and within the Western Hemisphere, if that's going to be the case, right? And we need to get out of, again, as he said, and which history demonstrates, the Middle East has taken far more than it has given us. We spent 20 years, our longest war in Afghanistan cost $2 trillion. And America's oil, less than 5% comes from the Middle East. America does not need the Middle East, right? America does not need the Middle East. America needs to focus on its own national interests, on developing our technology, our education, our decrepit infrastructure, right? And repairing our reputation in the world, which our involvement in the Middle East continues to erode. So something else though that I found to be oxymoronic, right, in President Trump's speech was when he said, well, he's going to send the Iranians back to the Stone Ages. But at the same time, in the same breath, he said, well, the negotiations are ongoing, right? So again, like I said, that speech was closest to a concession speech that you can expect from President Donald Trump, right? Who would never, he never conceded that he lost the 2020 elections to this day, right? To this day. So you can't expect he's going to concede to having lost uh, a war, a battle in which he was the instigator. He was the initial aggressor, in which he instigated. He wouldn't concede that, right? So what's oxymoronic though is um, during the Stone Age. That's we're talking about. He said he wants to send the great civilization of the Iranians, right, back to 3 million years or over 10,000 years. Well, but he's going to be discussing with them. Early man, Stone Age man could not talk. They use gestures, right? Or they go, oh. So how I'm being facetious now, but think about it. How are negotiations going to be? How are negotiations going to proceed if modern American men are to be discussing with people that have been sent back all the way back to the Stone Age, who can't communicate, who can't speak, right? There won't be any coherent communication going on, and so unfortunately, uh, that's not something that we want or should expect to happen. And I think that's just a part of the continued bluster and the rhetorical flourishes that the president has engaged in since the onset of the war. And just uh, I think we can expect uh, a de-escalation and a wrapping up of this unnecessary war. Uh, you know, Israel continuing. Well, Israel can take care of itself, but I think I'm glad and that from indications, America is not going to have boots on the ground. What will Iran do? Um, I don't want to use this to prognosticate stuff, but importantly, though, Iran had indicated that. Um, Things it had on the table with respect to negotiation and cessation of hostilities were that America should compensate um, or pay reparations for damages and losses it sustained in the war. Uh, Alternatively, it said it would maintain control of the Strait of Hormuz through and exact the toll, right? Exact a toll from people engaging in trade for any shipping that passes through that. So I guess since President Trump is saying he's giving that up, that's pretty much what's happening, right? Again, you're never going to get a genuine admission of concession by President Donald Trump. I think the media, Americans should know him by now from the history, right, of his right of his dealings. So he's not going to outright concede that, but his withdrawal, that means uh, Iran gets to exact that toll in the Strait of Hormuz. That's one. Um, Now he said he'd uh, regarding the enrichment program. U.S. intelligence claims Iran was not enriching, it was not proceeding with its nuclear program. That in fact, that the deal, the package it had with Iran had with the Obama administration, still honored by the Biden administration, had been successful, right? And of course, they said the assassinated Ayatollah Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei had issued a fatwa, and he was against the development uh, of nuclear weapons, right? And they said he had actually been the force restraining Iran's program, enrichment program, development of nuclear arms, and they said, well, now that he's gone, that restraint is has been terminated, and the his successor, Mushtaba Khamenei, is more in line with the hardliners in the Revolutionary Guard who want that uh, nuclear weapon. If for anything else, it will serve as a deterrent. Now, how President Trump now he said he's going to use satellites so to watch out to see to be able to ensure that that never happens, right? So we can, for all intents and purposes, America's involvement ceases. 2 to 3 weeks. You can't. There can be no invasion that will last 2 to 3 weeks. So there'll be no boots on ground. Continued air bombing. It's not going to achieve anything, right? They've been for the past month. President Trump and Israel have said they'll hit Iran bigger than ever before. That's just part of the propaganda of war, right? And of course, then they can always expect a retaliation from Iran. Um, so in any event, the sweet part um, of the speech, like I said, is there'll be no boots on ground, and we can expect this is actually a sort of a concession of President Trump that America is withdrawing from the war. Of course, the other part of the war is Israel. But Israel can take care of itself. Israel can be engaged in its own wars without America's involvement. My name is Olurotimi Osha, and I'll keep you posted. Thank you.